Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Cool. So just the three of us today. Alessio's on public holiday. Before we dive into the agenda things, I'm just curious. I just saw Jav put in a API tuning meeting for later on. Graham, is that meeting too late for you? It's in like a few hours.
Yeah, unfortunately, probably just past. It's 10:30 PM my
Yeah.
time.
That's totally fine, because what I was going to suggest to Jav
Probably
is
do 9:30, but not 10:30.
I think Jav's probably trying to be ambitious and get absolutely everyone on. So I was going to say, like, judging from the stuff that we've got on the agenda from Henry, like, we should go through that together now. And I'll suggest to Jav that he pushes his stuff into the EMEA Kate's demo, which we have later today.
Yeah,
and then we kind of get the overlap.
I think we're anyway into research right now. So I think there's not much to decide, maybe just what we need to research. And I put this on the agenda today, especially because I wanted to involve Graham into this discussion more, because yesterday he was missing out, and we discussed some things and I wanted to get him into the loop.
Yeah, that's great. Dive in. That's great. Let's go straight in.
Yeah, and I think we should anyway try to be more async on these discussions, right? If you discuss this too often in spontaneous meetings, it's hard to follow. Yeah. And so we need to somehow get this into issues.
Yeah, look, I don't have I definitely just want to make it clear, I don't have a problem if you guys sync up or whatever. I'm definitely all for that. The only thing is I wasn't really able to make much progress today. And I think now I'm definitely, whereas where we were handing over a bit more, I'm so far behind on this specific issue that I'm probably not much help at the moment. But yeah, let's spend the time to catch up on it. Sure.
Yeah. So do we want to dive into it right now?
Yeah, go for it. Let's see what we can do. Yep.
Yeah. So just as a summary, so what we did last week is increasing the HBA CPU target on Canary and one of the zonal clusters for API to 3,200 milli CPUs, which is 80% of 4 CPUs. And this led to problems because we saw a slight updex drop in general.
Yeah.
Then later we noticed that we also came to Ruby thread contention a lot, which is probably because we just use more CPUs, so workers need to wait more often and longer for getting the Ruby lock. And so this, and also in Canary we saw that we often had drops in updates correlated to Canary deploys, but later it turned out that we see these anyway, regardless of CPU turning up or down. So we have an issue with Canary deployments, it seems, which maybe is a little bit related to API tuning. And then we discussed yesterday a little bit of reasons where we are stuck. And one idea was that maybe we have an issue because API is very slow at starting up, right? API pods take a while until they can spin up, and we often scale up and down. And so one idea was to find a way to not as often scale, like having a longer cooldown phase, which seems problematic because our GKE Kubernetes doesn't support it right now. There's a beta feature, but that would need chart adjustments to jump to the beta API to exploit something like this. So this is more a long-term thing, but that could help generally, I think. but we need to research how much time our pods spend in starting up, and if they are slow after that even, because maybe they need to warm up some caches, I don't know. Maybe they generally are a little bit slow at the beginning. That would also explain the updex drops for Canary, for instance, because we have a smaller fleet, and if the new pods are at the beginning slower to respond, then we have a bigger impact here than with the bigger clusters, where we don't see this as much. And so our current idea is to just slightly increase the HPA target again to see that we can come to a level where we use less pods but don't reach the saturation limit, so that we still are fine. And that's what I will try after this meeting. Again, just in Canary. So this is where we can fine-tune a little bit and come to a better usage of resources and maybe a lower number of pods. But what we can do after that is a little bit, in discussion, unclear now. And that would be cool if you have some ideas there, Graham.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
we need to really research the behavior of our pods and the scaling behavior and the resource usage when starting up. But behind that, we are not sure right now.
So I agree with everything you said, and it's worth noting, actually, thinking about this more, actually, thinking about tech debt for this month as well, and observability in particular. It seems more, I hit this a similar kind of thing, touching on when I did the console work, the console investigation. We are still, from an observability standpoint, we still can't establish. It's hard for us. Maybe we should create a new issue for this, but I think this might be covered under Andrew's observability epic. Creating a timeline of a deployment starts. We say we want new pods. We run out of resources, so a scaling event has to happen. Like, new pods need to be scaled up. This is when Kubernetes gets told. The cluster autoscaler determines that I need to scale new nodes. Those new nodes come online. Those new pods go onto those nodes. And, that full story, and then of winding those backwards. Yes, I can scale down now, and I scale those things down. So what is interesting, and I didn't really think about it until this issue came up, but it's entirely possible. So interestingly, how the autoscaler works is it looks for pods that can't be scheduled, right? So it's actually, the cluster autoscaler is watching Kubernetes, and it's like, hey, I see a pod that's saying I cannot be scheduled, there's not enough CPU. And then this is the cluster. So there's two parts. There's the pod autoscaler. So how many pods am I going to scale up or down? And then the cluster autoscaler, which responds to that, right? So there's two scalers going on. But it's interesting because the cluster autoscaler will just go, oh, okay, so there's not enough nodes for these workloads. I need to spin up new nodes. And that can take time. So I would bookmark that as 5 minutes for a node to come online if it's happening when demand. And so it's interesting what you're saying with deployments, because it makes sense. If everything is tuned fine and we're just got enough to cover, and then a deployment starts spinning up new pods and pushing, and it's not just the deployment spinning up new pods, deployment time, we're probably putting extra pressure on those pods because other pods are going away, connections are being dropped, things are being shuffled around. We put pressure on that. Therefore, the pod autoscaler thinks just naturally, oh, wow, these pods are being more pressured. I need to put new nodes in. If it takes new nodes, it takes like 5+ minutes for a new node to happen, by which we've already, the spike has come and gone. And so by the time we have new nodes ready, we're already over the hump. The autoscaler, pod autoscaler then goes, oh, I can scale down pods. It scales down pods. And then you're scaling down nodes again to kind of, like you kind of, the lag between when you determine you need new nodes and when new nodes come online can be 5+ minutes long. And that's huge. That's a huge amount of time.
Yeah, I just shared my screen. I hope you can see it.
Yeah, sure.
Which is showing you the node scaling, and the red line is Canary, right? And so you see it constantly during daytime when we do deployments and also have more traffic, constantly scaling up and down on nodes, right? So that maybe really is exactly what you're saying. Same should be true for pods. Yeah, let's scale down to same scale. So this is pod scaling up and down all the time, right? And for nodes, you see this matching the traffic, but really a lot of nodes getting up and down. And
yeah,
I guess
that's a huge
matches with the this you see each time we do a canary deployment, you see these apdex drops.
Oh yeah,
Exactly matching here, and so I think that is maybe really with node scaling up and down canary, but this is canary, and I think so. This is exactly a thing where we need to work on the scaling, being less ambitious. But
yeah, so sorry, keep going.
Yeah, but for the other issue is how to make better use of resources. This is the second one, how we can use more CPUs without running into this thing that we run out of resources before we scaled up again, which is, coming to the same conclusion, right? We need to be faster in scaling up, or don't do the scaling as often as we do, but then we would need more resources most of the time, right?
So I think so there's a few different options we have here. So I wasn't able to spend it. I wanted to spend some time today, but I wasn't able to fully investigate so I do believe that getting the cluster autoscaler to not be as aggressive, to say, using those settings or whatever to say, if I've just scaled recently, please don't scale, like don't do as much work as often. I know, Skarbek is right. So there's options in the configuration of the scaler itself. We may, and I'm not sure, we may have access to some of those configurations through GKE. I'll actually we can reach out and confirm with Google. And how you actually do it is, I think if it's kubelet configurations, they've actually got documentation on how to change kubelet configuration. So we might be able to override it. It sounds like, though, long-term, from what I had a quick look today, the new auto-scaling API, the API version, the V2 beta 2, V1 beta 2, I think, which has those settings exposed directly in the manifests, I think probably has the best chance we have of getting something that is easy to configure and manage for us and workable. The chart work, I had a look today, is not too bad. It's certainly not like a little bit of work, but I think how we could do it is we could actually make a Helm flag basically that says enable V2 auto scaling. And then in the auto scaling Kubernetes object itself, we can kind of do some conditionals. So if that flag is enabled, do V2 beta 2 and then expose another Helm option. So I do think we can do some chart work where we can make those objects configurable based off what you pass in, which could be, if we really wanted to go down that path, I definitely think that would be the cleanest way, because then also in the future, that API will get promoted to like a proper version, and then we'll just we can take away that conditional. But we certainly can do conditional objects in the chart based off, what you tell it to do. So I think that might be a way we can get this. The other thing is there's a few different ways you can trick the autoscaler into keeping nodes ready, even if they're not being used. So you can set up a dummy deployment that's like one pod big, that's the size of your whole node, but then you set the priority class on it on the lowest possible, so it'll always get evicted. So it's kind of like if you have 10 nodes, then you have this deployment that takes up one node, and so it goes on by itself on the 11th node. And then when the autoscaler deploys new pods, it goes, oh, well, I need to evict something. I'll evict this dummy deployment because you set the priority really low. And then that way you're kind of always ahead of the autoscaler one pod. It's a hack. It's pretty ugly, but it's a possibility. I think there's other things there's other tricks people can do, but I guess that's the question. I mean, it sounds like if we're confident that having extra capacity always around would help, we can try and figure out the best way. So we got two options. We can either try and do the chart work to to see if that helps at all. A quick question: are we seeing this in staging and pre, or just production? This hit.
Let me check. I don't know if we have enough traffic.
That's fine. That's what I would have thought.
So in pre, it looks pretty stable, and staging the same. We just have a flat line there.
Yeah. So it's a shame we can't kind of reproduce it and test things in. It really seems like we need to even if we set the cluster auto scaler to not scale down as much, because really over the day, you kind of want like this nice curve, right? Like as traffic goes up, we scale up, but we stay there for a while. And then when traffic goes down, we scale off. We don't want to kind of keep seesawing up. And even if it seesaws up and down, you kind of don't want that. So we kind of do want both things. We kind of want extra capacity, just a little bit, 1 or 2 nodes, just so that we can
just
get it.
try to figure out how much we need, right? By setting the HPI CPU target just the right way that we keep some CPU buffer. But
the problem is even if
some nodes around.
Yeah, but the problem is even if we set that, when you get that sudden spike, like, you know what I mean? Like you're still
if
relying
the spike
on
is
it.
Huge, then you need more CPU buffer, then you can't. Fast enough.
It's a tricky situation.
I mean, ideally, it would be that we just scale up and down two times a day, right? After the big traffic spikes that we see each day, that would be just good enough to save a lot of resources.
We could,
right?
Like if we configured that new beta API and set a cooldown on scale down for like 3 hours, at least to start, and then we slowly bring that in until we feel like we get the profile we look like, maybe that's the way we go.
But that, as you said, requires some chart work and testing. So that's not the thing to be done within 1 or 2 weeks, right?
What's the balance between short term, because we know longer term we want to do more with like custom metrics and have more scaling. Assuming that is like just a few months away, like I'm thinking we'll probably want to do that after the web migration. Like what do we need to achieve now to conclude the API service?
I think what we are targeting right now in the tuning issue is just the simple thing that we try to find the fine-tuned HPA CPU target, which allows us to go a little bit down on pods that we use right now without getting into these API updates drops. So right after this meeting, I will set a new CPU target, which is not 80%, but 70% this time, and hoping that it's low enough to not get us into trouble because of traffic spikes, and still showing us that we go down and usage of pods. This is what we did here, right? Where we were too ambitious. Like the green line is showing how we scaled down on pods a lot, but we got into updates drops. And I expect with a CPU target of 70 maybe this time, we just reach half of the drop in pods that we use, but without running into problems.
What do we currently have it at?
Currently, it's 55%, like 2,200 milli CPUs we have set. Okay. So we just use 55% of our available CPU resources before we scale up. So it's a lot of unused resources just to have enough buffer to not run into issues, because we are careful, of course.
Could we take a smaller step first? Like, does it make sense to go to like 65 and see that for a few days?
We just do this in Canary this time. So I think the impact would be very low and we can easily watch it. I think it's fine to do it. I mean, we didn't have a big updates drop. Like we only were alerted for Canary anyway, not for the one cluster that we also did in production. We had lower latencies, but not below the SLO target.
Okay.
So I think it's good enough to try with that, and then we can decide if we need to go back.
Okay, good. Sounds good. Because it'd be good to know, like we're clearly not going to get to the perfect solution, because like we were talking, I mean, we covered it, I think it was in the APAC demo last week, wasn't it, Graham, where Andrew was talking about the pressure we're putting on Thanos from starting and stopping pods really frequently. There isn't a good solution right now. We have to do some stuff with custom metrics, but we should just get it so it's good enough for now, and then we can move on. And after the web, we'll have to review the whole thing.
So, so I'll just add a quick note. So we've talked about 2 things, right? So pod auto scaling, getting that so it, is getting the pods right, and then also that lag in cluster auto scaling. So I double checked the official docs for the cluster auto scaler, and it does point out if you want to over provision, this is how you do it. It's basically how I talked about. It's got very clear steps outlined there. It's like you create a over provisioning priority class. You create a dummy pause container with that, with the number of replicas equal to the number of nodes you want to keep warm. And then it walks that through. I've put the link in the meeting notes there, and it walks through how to set all that up. We could conceivably put all those resources that are needed into the GitLab extras release in our Kate's workloads. So we could add some manifests in an MR today and probably set that up easily. What that would do is we could keep, let's say, 3 nodes warm. I'm not, that won't fix every piece of the problem, but that should in theory give us enough headroom so that whenever we are scaling pods or doing deploys, at least, we've got extra nodes around, if that makes sense. We always have at least 1 to 3 extra nodes ready to go that we don't have to wait for. And maybe that will help the app desktop drop. Maybe that's not the problem, but that's certainly one thing we could try.
Yeah, sounds great, because I think this slow scaling thing is really a big issue that we need to solve midterm. And short term, I think just working today and maybe tomorrow on the fine-tuning of HPA CPU target will give us something which is a little improvement. Hopefully. And then we can stop there, I think.
Sure.
And what did I want to say? I forgot about it. Sorry. There was a third thing.
Henry, would you mind writing this up in the issue so that we do turn these conversations async?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, thanks. Great, cool, thanks for bringing that up. So I just wanted to take a couple of minutes so we have some time at the end as well, but I was just curious, so release management training. So Henry, you've just come out, Graham, you'll be going in soon, but any preference from either of you on, in terms of, I guess, learning and then also kind of reference, like, do you have preferences over docs or short videos, or what would be the easiest way to access this sort of information?
So I think for me, what I kind of like the best is docs, I think are good, but then also access to someone for questions. Like, yeah, docs plus a very clear feedback loop. And maybe even like often what I'd like to do is like do the docs, and then I'd probably try and schedule a meeting with someone with a follow-up of that, right? I don't mind videos, but I'm kind of like, to me as a learner, I learn the same from videos or documentation, and both are non-interactive. To me, it's that interactive element when I got questions, or just, you know, I don't mind asking questions even asynchronously, but often, you know, it's great to hear someone like explain it straight away, and you can ask for clarification straight away instead of the feedback. So I'm more than happy with just, you know, documentation, and then like a follow-up of, you know, even just an informal follow-up and say, hey, how did you find it? You know, any questions, even if it's, you know, very short or something. That's
cool. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, same here basically, but I prefer more reading docs instead of watching videos, because that just works a little bit better for me. But it depends. There are some video where you have a demo of something which makes it really clear how something works. Then it's helpful,
very
right?
true, actually. Yeah.
If it's a demo, but just talking about something which you also could read, then I would prefer reading.
Okay. Cool.
And also, as I mentioned yesterday, because the documentation that we have for release management is very good, but also very detailed and a lot of documentation. It's problematic at the beginning, because for most of those different docs that we have, you need a certain amount of context already to fully understand them.
Yeah.
And it's hard to understand those pieces without having the context already. And that's why I came up with this, drawing this picture, because without having this mental model already, it's hard to follow the documentation in some way. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg problem. But I think looking at this big picture thing and then walking through this interactively with somebody, I think would be the best to get into this. Because if you see the whole thing visually and then can talk through details of this big picture with somebody, I think that would be very helpful at the beginning if you start up getting into that.
Cool. Okay, great. And then are there any particularly difficult pieces or particularly unknown parts? And it's also fine if you just say like the whole thing, but are there any specific pieces that are particularly, I guess, hard to wrap your head around?
Yeah, I mean, the problematic thing is to figure out in which repository do we have which part of code, which is triggering which pipeline and which project, which is triggering another pipeline in another project, right? Because this is super confusing, and to to find your way through all of this, even if you talk about this, it's super hard. That's exactly the point of the big picture, because then you can at least see I'm coming from here and going to there with this pipeline triggering something. Without seeing this, I wasn't able to follow it when it was explained to me. And
this could just be my complete, new to all of this, but I find sometimes, and possibly this has just happened over as everything's been developed, things have been renamed or different terms have been used. But sometimes I see a little bit, and maybe it's because these things are different. I think I see different terms used for the same thing. A classic example would be like just looking in the upcoming release channel right now. I see it says GitLab chat ops says new coordinated pipeline, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what's a coordinated pipeline? Is that an auto deploy pipeline? So it should, to me, even just a small thing like saying new auto deploy pipeline. If we're going to call something auto deploy, which is great, we've got like a very clear name for something, using that name consistently everywhere, I think is really important. Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
Naming, and especially upstream, downstream jobs. I know GitLab gives you short, if there's room to make things more descriptive, making sure our descriptives are consistent and accurate, I think
it's a really good
can
point.
help as well for understanding.
Cool. Okay, great stuff. Thanks for that. So we've got a lot of work to do, I think, to make these easy to use. So please, if you have questions or you see opportunities for us to make them clearer, please ask or point them out, or update the docs. But we'll also try and do the same as we bring people online and trained up. Awesome. So we've just got a few minutes left at the end. So Henry, oh, hang on, stop recording.